Okay, there we go. Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings be unto you all. I am Minister Jamie Eatman, and finally, we are on the rise. Today is off to a great start, even though it's a little slow, but it's still a great start. We're here. We have the opportunity to do this again, and we are in the mix as I speak now. We always begin with prayer, so let us begin. Most Holy Father, we thank you. Father, we just thank you for this day and this hour. We thank you for all that you're doing, all that you've done to bring us to this point, this space, this place, and time. And we pray that you open our eyes, ears, minds, and hearts as we proceed from here, as we interact from here, as we stand here, that we will stand and we will say and do those things that are going to make a difference in someone's life, educating, motivating, and inspiring. We just pray that everything will be said and done, be to your honor and to your glory. I come and ask forgiveness for any sins we've committed knowingly or unknowingly. Not only we, but our seeds and the seeds of our seeds. We pray you forgive us for our trespasses, forgive those who may have trespassed against us. I pray for those who are in authority, those that are making decisions, that you will open their eyes, that you will give them sound counsel, sound judgment, that they might rule rightly, or they might, whatever it is that they're doing, that they might do it according to that which is righteous and that which is just. And if not, Father, we pray that you would deal with them accordingly, that your will might be done, that your people might have reasons to give you honor, glory, and praise. And when all is said and done, you will be glorified. These blessings we most humbly ask in the spirit of Christ. Amen, amen, and amen. All right. Welcome, Brother Gregory. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just great. Did you get the program?
I
Uh,
did.
yes, so it's really the one from last week. As far as last week go, did you want to run over a quick review, or I can do it?
Oh no,
Depends on-
you can go ahead.
Okay, right, great then. All right, we kind of talked about some things. We were actually talking about the after action review of Black Lives Matter. Of all things, after action review of Black Lives Matter. Some might say, why something like that? That's been a good while ago. There's a lot of things going on since then. Well, the reason for that is the fact that if we didn't learn anything from that, that was a teaching tool, that was a teaching moment. If we didn't learn anything from that, we could very well go into this present thing before us now, minus the experience and knowledge that we could have gleaned had we done an after action review before.
Hmm.
And we want to do that here in the program because as we move forward, as you know, this is the OTR movement, on the rise movement. So as a movement, it's always something that we can learn as well from going over this particular movement. So that's kind of why we are doing it. And as far as the things that we talked about here, there's four questions. We got to the one that asks what was done right. And we talked about
Hmm.
some of the things that was done right. We talked about some of the things that could have been done better. I think we were kind of wrapping that one up and going into the portion about um, how do we correct it. And
Right.
that's where we kind of ended. We were just piercing over into that. But anything stands out in your mind that you wanted to bring up before we move on?
No, no, no. We should definitely get to number three here, and we
Okay.
can discuss it.
Sounds like you're pretty ready for number three. I like that. Okay. So we are going to start then with how do we correct it? You know, for those of you who didn't watch last week's program, you might want to go and take a look at it because the how do we correct it is going to be addressed from some of the things that we identified as being problems that, things that weren't actually done correctly and so forth. Okay, Brother Gregory, here we are. Talk to me.
Hmm. All right. So, um, the one thing that we do know uh, is that it's very easy for someone to say that they're doing something good for people, and it turns out that they aren't doing anything good for anybody. So the one thing that we need to do is research. Do our research, do our research. We have literally information at our fingertips when we pick up our phone, when we go log into our computer. We have literally have all the information of the world that is known to public at our fingertips. And all we have to do is do a little bit of research. Even for basic questions, With a simple Google search, you can find out where people stand on things, how people actually are, if they're lying to you, if they're just trying to say something to you to make you feel better or make you feel good. It's very easy to do a little research and find out what we can do, how we can support people and how we can support things.
Right. I agree with 100%. And that portion about going to Google, there was a time when I would follow that up with the difference between internet search and actually a scholarly search. You know, there's Google and there's Google Scholarly, and the information that you get will be different, but it's to be utilized in different manners. But that's not to say that one is actually wrong and the other is correct. It's just that one will give you more information than the other will. But what's important is what you do with it. Because as Brother Gregory said, you know, when you get this information, most people will get it and, you know, it's enough to go and run with. It's enough to start a conversation. But if you haven't done your research, you're going to run into someone that always has a little bit more information than you do. And in the military, we call them sharpshooters. And what sharpshooters look for, they look for a hole in what you're saying, something that they can shoot at, and they will take their shot. So the better your presentation is, the better off you're going to be. And if you think about this for a moment, imagine you've given a great presentation and everybody is just there, and you know that recency effect. And somebody comes behind you with something that, you know, doesn't seem all that important, may not be all that related, but they address something that you said, and the crowd goes, ah, you know, they heard that. That's the thing they're going to take with them. So the better we are in what we're doing and the better we are at it, the more confidence we'll gain from the people that we are actually doing it for or looking to impress in the process. Okay, so we talked a lot about the money aspect. How important, I guess, at this point we can look at it before we get too into the program, Brother Greg. Let's talk about that for a moment. We kept going back to the money, and we're at the point now of what could they have done better. But why is money so important? You know, money is thought to be evil, the root of all evil, but yet everything goes back to money. Any insight on that?
Well, I mean, if you use your money for good and you're using it to help someone or help a group of people, um, it's being put to good. It's not being put to evil. However, if you're the type of person that uh, uh, you hoard your money and you hold on to your money, that can cause a root to more evils. That's why they say it's the root of all evils. So if you if you take that money and you trying to get it by any means necessary, then you're going to be the type of person that you're going to do anything you can that you want to do to get that money. Your goal is the money. So your goal should never be the money. That's the problem right there. If your goal is the money, that's the root of the evil. So if you take that root out of the equation, there is no evil. So if you say, well, you know what? I have this money in my pocket. I don't need this money. I can give it to someone that actually needs it. I don't need this extra 25 cent. I don't need this extra dollar. Let me give it to somebody that needs it. Then it's no longer the root of your evil. Well, you don't have evil to be to for that money to root into because you're
Right.
giving it away or you're putting it to good use. Uh, you don't have to give away your money to put it to good use. If you know your child needs a roof over their head, and you know your child needs some healthy food in their belly, you can use that money to get food in their belly and a roof over their head. So it's not always the root of all evil, but it can be a root of all evil if you uh, are trying to get as much as you can as all the time, and that's your motivation.
Right, right. And I like the way you put that because it is needed. I think the Bible says money answers all things or something along those lines. So it is a, and I'll even use the word necessity because if you're going to get something done, it's going to be necessary. So when you think about it, even the little story would go and get the corn out the fish's mouth. That corn was needed. It may have, people may look at how we got was gotten, but it was needed. And today we still talk about money. As I run through these others here, we're going to just talk about them briefly and to how we can correct that. So let's talk about this. One was a lack of unified strategy and leadership clarity. How do we correct that going forward?
Um, my guess is, uh, uh, well, first you got to unify, and you have to be on the same page with everybody else. Your end goal has to be, this is our end goal, and then you make a plan for the end goal. If you don't have an end goal in sight and you don't have a plan for the end goal, then nobody's going to be on the same page. There's going to be a lot of chaos and discombobulation.
Right, correct. And that was exactly what happened. A lot of people saw this thing that looked so great on TV, and when you were out there, it might have been, it sounded good and it felt good, but we wasn't looking at the long-term game. We were there in the moment, in the moment. A lot of things happen in the moment, but if we only dealing with the moment is going to pass. And that's kind of what happened. That's literally what we were saying. There was a lack of a unified strategy, leadership clarity, because that was lacking. As you said, Brother Greg, how can you get a long-term goal if you don't have the leadership and they haven't come together to plan? You can respond. That's the difference in being reactive and proactive. If we go through life only being reactive, that's when you ever heard the fight or flight? The energy gets up and we are going to do something, but is it going to be the wisest thing? It will be the
Yeah,
thing in the moment, but it may not always be the wisest thing. So we want to keep that peace in mind. And Brother Gregory, the other one you just touched on it. It says short-term mobilization, not long-term organization. No long-term organization. We wasn't planning for the long term, so we just got short-term mobilization.
right.
That was something that. How do we fix something like that?
Well, the first thing is you can't let your emotions dictate your movements. A lot of people let their emotions dictate their movements, and they don't see the facts.
Right.
And people like to prey on your emotions because an emotion is a very powerful thing. God tells us to love each other, and that is an emotion. And every person that speaks about the future of the world all say the same thing, that we're going to have to love each other. That is an emotion. Emotion, a presence is so strong. The opposite of that emotion, opposite of love, is hate. So that's an emotion as well. So if you can prey on one of those two emotions, you'll have a powerful presence. And so a lot of the things that we want to help and we want to do, you have to take your emotion out of it and look at it from a logical standpoint, and then you'll have a long-term goal.
Right. I like that. And that becomes very important because if you don't take the emotions out, they're going to come into play. And a little bit of leaven leavens the whole loaf. You can look at that any way you want. A little bit of emotions is not good for the whole thing. When you look at it and you allow it to come into play, people don't think in the manner which they should. We watch television and we see these scenes where whenever you want to catch somebody, what's the first thing they do? They go and grab a family member. And
Hmm.
that's the emotion. And when people go and do things, you got some people that seem so cool, cold, and you wonder, are they going to shoot the family member? And some of the craziest things, they even shoot through the person, hit the person they're trying to shoot at. But what I'm getting at here is when that emotion comes into play, it is challenging. And that's the thing that we have to, if we're going to learn anything, that's something that we should learn right there, that emotion piece. And that is one of the ways to avoid repeating that. It has to be something there that's thought out. Sometimes you have to take a step back, and
Hmm.
that step back affords you the opportunity to give some thought to your next move, and that next move becomes a very valuable one.
Right. A prime example of letting the emotions dictate something is when Martin Luther King got shot. Everybody before he got shot was unified. They had a clear goal. They were achieving goals. But as soon as he got shot, that spiked an emotion. And so literally people around the world were crying because of Martin Luther King's passing. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a sad day. However, that emotion was so strong for him that the people that needed for him to go away and for him to stop pressing forward, they capitalized on that emotion. How did they
Hmm.
capitalize on that emotion? They showed people, oh yeah, this is what Martin Luther King fought for, but it wasn't the whole picture.
Right. Hmm.
Unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity to play the entire game. He got shot out by halftime. So that second half of the plan for him after the civil rights was to start getting an equal level playing field for as black people. And in small little sections, the Black Panther picked up that mantle, but they didn't have a clear leader, if that makes sense. So that's why
Yeah.
they used that emotion of the sadness of Martin Luther King's passing to separate and divide us.
Right. And I like you, and even on this review here, you said something that addressed what came after with the Black Panthers. You said they didn't have a clear leader. That was one of the problems we just stated, correct?
Hmm.
So if we keep having that problem, it's going to keep having its impact. So at some point we gotta do better. And people might say, we're in the middle of something. We don't really have time to do that. I, for one, I don't necessarily believe that's true. I think that by the time a move is made, if we brought some people to the table, there's some people right now that have been fighting against some of the same things that we're dealing with at this moment for years. But if they haven't been consulted and we're dealing with it as though it's something brand new, we have people going out with, as I said, you see, those are the ones with the pitchfork and the axes, when the cannons, they haven't even consulted. They haven't even called the artillery or the armor. So that's the difference, I think, between acting in emotions and sitting down and strategizing. That makes a big difference. The other thing I had down here was that there was an over reliance on symbolism over substance. Symbolism over substance. And you can look at that different ways. How do you kind of
Uh-uh. Where'd you go?
look at that? Reliance
Okay, there you
over substance. Can you hear me now?
are.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, I can
asking
hear
your
you.
thought on
I
that
think,
statement. Go ahead.
well, I just touched on it. Martin Luther King was the symbol for civil rights. He was what led us to gain civil rights and led us on a path of being on the right path to being equal with the rest of our American people. And so he was the symbol. When you took away the symbol, some people, a lot of people, not some, a lot of people relied on that symbol, and they saw that was basically the nail in the coffin at that point. Because prior to him, I believe it was Kennedy, and black people loved Kennedy. They loved Kennedy,
Hmm.
and when they shot Kennedy, uh, it wasn't too many more people they needed to take out after that. It was Martin Luther King, it was Malcolm X, It was Elijah Muhammad. He got taken out in a different way, but it was that's the people that were leading us to the grand plan. And
Mhm.
so, um, it's already been proven that they strategically took out these people for the purpose of stopping our march forward. And they succeeded in some ways, not in the long run, but in the short one, they did succeed. And we we there were some leaders that were trying to hold on, like Reverend Jesse Jackson. He held on long as he could to keep up that fight, and he saw a lot of things accomplished after Martin Luther King. But a lot of people relied on that symbolism of Martin Luther King, that he spoke for us and he led us. And once that was taken away from us, it was hard to keep that same faith, if you know what I mean.
Right, right. And you're right. And I think that what he symbolically represented. The Bible speaks of a time where Moses was there, and the people needed to see him, and his arms were raised, and it says that there were people there that were holding his arms up, so that that symbol of his raised arms continued. So the symbolism is important, but at the same time, if you have an over reliance on symbolism over the substance of what it is you're doing for, if we're fighting a battle for justice, we're not fighting a battle for Dr. King. In
Right,
other words,
exactly.
Dr. King would want us to keep going. If he had the baton or the mantle and he failed, he would be looking for those to his left and right to pick it up and continue the battle, continue the struggle. And that is kind of what I think that speaks to. But that problem there was identified during the Black Lives Matter movement. That was one of the problems they had. I think the
Hmm.
fact that it was murder and they was using murder as and what that had taken place, but they didn't have any true substance. So once I called it the catalyst, once the catalyst, which was the emotions, died down, the what they call the movement died down. And then that was when all those questions, as you said, about going after them. What did they do with the money? How did they do this? How did they do that? That's when the media, when I hear, well, some of these people, they're just looters. What are they going to do now? They turned on the thing that they were promoting all that time. And the other one, and we talked about earlier, which is inadequate economic strategy. So what do we
Right.
do? What do we do with that? And
Well, when you put in a solid strategy, there'd be no room for people to scam anybody. There'd be no room for mismanage of funds, because it'll be a proven method. Like, don't get me wrong, people start with just cause, but like what happened with BLM, it turned into a scam. And I think if they would have had a money management plan that is rooted in factual evidence that it can work. Like a prime example is high interest savings accounts. We know for a fact that's the best way to grow money without actually working, is to put your money in a high interest savings account. That's because the bank uses your money to take care of other things, and they pay you for using your money. That's the interest. So we
mhm,
know this works. But if they had something similar where people that donate their money, they can track their money and see where the money's going, and it's in something that is factual, that they've seen work before, versus somebody just saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, we helping people with it," not just by word of mouth, but they can see it. Then it would be easier to fall, help people that need help when they fall on the, fall down, and help them out that way. But you have to have something, a money making, or not money making, but a money distributing distribution strategy. There you go.
right, there you go. Money distribution. And that is so correct. And and that's interesting because the distribution strategy we're at that point, but we also have to have a means of collecting the money as well as distributing. So all of that becomes important. Shouldn't be a hindsight or a second thought. All that needs to be important. And I want y'all to really get this. We can say this now because we are doing an after action review. The fact that they didn't do that, it might have been, how quickly or what did they have to do to jump, what hoops did they have to jump through to achieve what they did achieve. So we're not saying that what they did was a waste or shouldn't have been done. We're just at this point now. Our point is, how do we improve upon that? So as we go into the next issue, we can take the lessons learned into the next issue. So those were the ones that we talked about that were wrong, and some additional things as far as that could have prevented that. One was build infrastructure, not just the movement. If they had built an infrastructure, all these people in all these cities in these states, if they had been able to communicate and continue some semblance of what they came together for with some type of infrastructure, they'd still
Mm-hmm.
be making a difference today. That was the guy that does what is his name? But anyway, I was watching him on a video and it was on YouTube, and he was speaking concerning Black Lives Matter. And it was interesting because um what's the Pastor Jamal name?
Well, I'm
What's
not
his
sure.
Okay, but anyway, he's the one that we've talked about on the show in the past. And I know y'all probably say, how could I reference someone that I don't know his name? His name isn't even important. Who he is isn't even important. What's important is to learn from the lessons of what I'm trying to bring out. But what he was speaking on was he was speaking on Black Lives Matter and how they did some things. And he identified, it's interesting because he literally was in a roundabout way doing an after action review. It wasn't an after action review collected, but he was pointing out some things that they failed to do. And I thought it was interesting because the reality of what's going on now, we don't realize it, but whether we call it a movement, declare it a movement, doesn't make it a movement. What qualifies it as a movement is the fact that it is a movement. Now that movement there's so many adjectives that was unorganized. We just talked about all those things that went wrong. Those were ways of defining that. And when you think about it in this season, there's some things going on, and I don't know. Let me just ask this question realistically. With everything that's going on, have you heard anything that asks something of you solely on the basis that you were a Black person in the last 60 days? Anything?
Yeah.
Okay. So
They
go ahead.
someone asked me would I donate money to the little boy that stabbed the white boy, claiming it was self-defense.
Mm,
And I said, well, let me do my research because that's what I do. With the short little research, I found out that people were donating money to the GoFundMe that they set up. Him and the lawyer set up. So they got him out of bed. They got him a lower bail because initially the judge said $1 million bill. They pleaded with the judge, got it down to I think it was like 250,000. So they raised money for the bail. Then they raised money for them to rent a $900,000 house, and they raised enough money for them to buy three more three vehicles, three more vehicles than they already had.
mm.
Cadillac Escalade specifically, and um, my question at that point was, what exactly is the money for?
Right.
Because at this point, it don't look like anything. It don't look like it's going towards his defense at all. And
Mm-hmm.
so then I said, okay, let me just hear what the lawyer has said because the lawyer did a press conference, did a short little research, found what he said, and I knew in the first 5 minutes of him speaking, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were going to use the mother and the father were going to use their son as a way to exploit people out of their money. Because the first thing he said was they let Rittenhauer uh, off when he said self-defense. They let he kept quoting white people. They let the white Marine off with self-defense. How come they not letting the black man off with self-defense? And I said,
Mm,
oh, I see exactly what he's doing. So with a little bit of research, I said, no, I'm not going to give my money to that. I'm no, because I haven't seen all the facts rolled in, and when the facts rolled in with those two white gentlemen, it was self-defense. I don't know if I see self-defense with a kid bringing a knife to school and then using it on another student. So, eh, I don't. I'm not. I'm not going to do that. And they questioned it. He was like, "Well, you're not going to donate to the black family? I thought you was black." I said, "Black ain't got nothing to do with it. I'm not going to give money to a murderer just because he black. Well, how you know
right.
he's a murderer? Oh, there's the question. Why would you give your money blindly to someone because they're black? That's the real
Okay.
question." And they paused, they thought about it. Well, let me do some research. They hung up the phone. Right, there you go. I did, while they were on the phone with me, I did a short little research with my phone and found out three facts that I was like, no, I can't do it just yet. I need some more facts to roll in before I donate to his cause.
Right. Hmm. Right. And you know, and when you look at situations like that, and the people around you, they don't, that may not be inclined to do their research, they looking at you crazy because they come up with something. All the things that we just said that should have been done and need to be done, they ain't thought about any of that. But they're looking at the fact that you're supposed to be doing something for one reason or another. And in this season we are in now, there's so many things going on that, depending on who you're talking to, we should be doing because we're black. And particularly, like you just said, we have to be careful. Can you imagine, um, just like they brought up that statement about the, this is the reverse of that. Well, when this white person pleaded innocent because of self-defense, they got off. And now the black person is here, they done this crime and they're pleading self-defense, and they should get off. So then if someone comes and says, well, there should be no law against crime if it's self-defense. Do you imagine how many deaths would occur as a result of that? And people will just say self-defense. When you open the door to
Right,
injustice, you are opening the door to something that you really don't want. There's a saying, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you take the sword out of the equation, then there is no justice. And that's the biggest thing that we really struggle with, the absence of justice versus trying to subvert it. If
right,
we were
exactly.
to look at it correctly and deal with it for what it is, we'd be much better off, much better off. My
Right.
friend, Brother Brown, he says here, greetings, friends, still fighting the devil over here. Brother, I know you are. I've been watching your comments. Brother Brown is from my hometown there. He's one of those Dr. King era civil rights leaders. I've been
Okay.
to him for a while. I've been trying to get him on the show, maybe some point. But thank you, my brother, for watching us. Please share. And don't hesitate to share your comments with us. We're doing an after action review of the Black Lives Matter. And you know, when I look at kind of what's going on, as I stated, I just looked him up. His name was Bryant, Jamal Bryant. And they said that he's referred to as an activist here. And in reality, I would truly say he's shaping up more and more to be that. I'm learning more and more about him. I only heard of him when that started, but with the Target thing, and he seems to be the main driver behind it, or one of the main drivers. But someone
Hmm.
informed me that uh, Target called in Reverend Sharpton to speak with him, and suppose it was a good interview, and he's supposed to be getting back with the person leading that, who is going to be Brother Bryant. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens with that. But every time there is something going on, and it's about emotions. That's why we don't get any place. Like what was it said? The substance over the symbolism. The
Mm-hmm.
symbolism behind what Target represented. And if you look at a lot of this with the DEI, that's the symbolism. But the
Mm-hmm.
substance impact is what are we looking at beyond that? If someone were to come and give you exactly what you wanted and this died out, what would really change? How much farther along would we be?
I can tell you.
Go
So
ahead.
we're going through this situation right now. Um, we all know how DEI works. People that are more qualified than you can possibly be overlooked because of skin color. Meaning, if they're not black, brown, or disabled, they would get looked over before that. And that's literally what DEI is. And so, when a lot of companies are getting rid of DEI, their quality is going to go up because they can hire more quality employees. And a lot of us had to go with the DEI for a long time and had to put up with horrible customer service and had to put up with horrible work and had to put up with horrible this and for a long time. And the reason why we had to put up with it is because a lot of people that were more qualified were being overlooked just because of their skin color. And
Right.
it was it was messed up in my opinion. Like I got hired a lot of times just because I had a disability, and um, there was two jobs I remember specifically. They called me. I didn't even call them. They said, "Hey, you want to work at such and such a hourly?" I said, "Man, that would be awesome. What's the job?" "Oh, you're gonna be this, that, and the third." I can't do that. I told him straight up. I can. I ain't never take a class for that. I don't know how to do nothing. But yeah, we can train you. Are you sure you can train me? Don't you think I need some experience in that area? And I had to turn down those jobs because they were just trying to hire me just because they wanted the tax break for hiring me because I have a disability. And it was a
Mm,
horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. They wanted the tax break, and I didn't know what was happening because I'm be honest with you, I didn't read a lot of into DEI when I was younger. But now that companies are starting to get rid of their DEI programming, um, we're gonna start to see more quality things happen in our country. And it's going to be because the best person for the job is doing the job, not just because they black, not just because they have a disability. It's going to be the best person for the job. Prime example: the mayor of South Fulton was hired because he was black. He was the first black mayor of South Fulton, the first one, and he'll probably be the last one because he is messing up. He stole money. He took trips abroad. He did this. A whole bunch of people that were hired because they were either a woman, black, or something else associated with DEI are being called out on their crap now because we can now call them out on their crap and we can easily say, no, it has nothing to do with you being black. It's because you were a horrible person.
right, right.
And like I tell people, well, actually, not, I don't tell people this. I was told this, and I wish I could tell people this is that um, my parents used to always tell me the person that points at someone else always has three fingers pointing at them. So if you're going to accuse somebody of doing something, you better make sure you are not doing that same thing. So like if I'm gonna accuse somebody of stealing and fraud, I better make sure I'm not doing no stealing and fraud. Prime example, the AG of New York City, she pointed at Donald Trump and said he's doing fraud for his properties, and she was doing the exact same thing. You would think if you go accuse somebody of something, you're not gonna do the same thing. Come on now, Jesus Lord.
Yep, I got you. But you know, a lot of that stuff when people get into those like discussions, it becomes so commonplace. And then when it comes to the forefront, you know, you don't know what or don't give much thought to what you're doing. Or somebody else could be doing your taxes, you know, just whatever the case may be. But when somebody look into you, look deeper at what it is you're doing, many times they're gonna find something. That's almost like anybody. If people look hard enough, they'll find something on anybody, especially with the way social media is. You could put something out there, may have had great intentions, but it can that someone can get it and they can misconstrue what you said, did, or whatever. So we're gonna have some of that. But the bottom line becomes if whatever you're gonna do or whatever you're going to stand for, make sure it's just because you never know when you're going to have to get into give an account or you're going to be called an account for what it is you said or done. And that becomes very
Mm-hmm.
important. Very important. Also, I have down here we could actually reimagine and train like train leadership, training leadership. Now that's something that I don't know really because you know I was in the military, so that's where I spent most of my assertive years. I don't know what to call my years now, but I'm on another phase of life now. But when you talk about leadership, it's something that needs to be ongoing. As a matter of fact, that may be something that I'm definitely going to try to look into because the same way people go to school and get their degrees for this and their degrees for that, there needs
Mm-hmm.
to be just something that pertains to leadership. There's some common leadership training that we can do within our communities. One of the
Mm-hmm.
roles of the Rise to Prosperity Incentive Program or the OTR community is educating, motivating, and inspiring. And looking at now to do some like formalized courses, mentoring, leadership. Those are type things there that are truly needed because if we were to put something like that in place that people can take at their own leisure, you never know what they would get from it. So when the occasion arises, people have something to draw from because that old saying is true. You can't lead where you won't go and you can't teach what you don't know. It's not
Mm-hmm.
enough for some person to be put out front because the position they're in, they're the next person that should be out there. And if it's someone that don't know how to utilize their resources or rely on people that may not be at the forefront, you don't always get the best person out front. Real leadership doesn't necessarily have to be up front, but it has to know how to operate from the rear, from the middle, wherever it finds itself. And that's something that, you know, it needs to be taught, but it also needs to be practiced. We have plenty of opportunity to practice in leadership. So as we move forward, that's something we definitely want to work on. Any comments on that before I give you this next powerful one here?
I completely agree with that. I remember when I was a young man that we used to have two paths in high school: college prep and technical,
Hmm.
and you would take classes based off of which your path was. And when I was a kid, in order for you to be a senator, you had to have some sort of law experience. That's what we were told in high school. They said you're probably
Okay.
gonna need some law experience. And we're like, why do I need to be a lawyer in order to be a senator? And they said, well, when people write bills and they pass bills, the experience of a lawyer, especially a contract lawyer, has that ability to read things and dice and make it plain for the rest of the America. So like when they are writing bills or they're writing new laws, it's usually 1,000 pages long for one law. But it's to make sure it's comprehensible and it's understandable that they cover all their bases, and that's why lawyers make good senators. And so we were like, oh, so if I want to be a senator, I have to follow the route of the lawyer. Fast forward to 2025, you don't have to be nobody to be a senator. That's who we got in the Senate now is people that don't have no background, people that are
Hmm.
ministers and preach the gospel and help people around the neighborhood, but don't have a clue on how to write a law, how to pass a bill, don't know how to do nothing in the government. And
Right.
so some people would say, oh, you probably should get somebody that knows how to do this, that, and the third in this position. And some people, like today, they would say, no, just hire the black woman, just hire the black guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Right.
DEI was. And
Right.
so um, I'm glad we're starting to move past it, and we're starting to understand that we want the best person for the job versus the person that we think we should be moving forward with, if that makes
Right.
sense.
It does. It does. And before I give you this one, I call the powerful one, Brother Greg. You said something. Tell me what your thoughts are on this. That we have it wouldn't even need to be called a citizen council, but let's just say, well, let's use the OTR community, on the rise community, a community of communities. And what that means is literally that if we look at a movement, OTR movement, builds OTR community. Within that community are individuals. And one of the goals in that community could be to develop a governmental system or governmental monitoring system so that individuals that had aspirations of running for office could actually be a part of that community, and their role would be to monitor the person that's in that position and keep the people within the community informed. Do you think something like that would be valuable?
Yeah, I like I said, when I was a kid, they had people for that. They were called mentors. You would
Mm-hmm.
hook up with somebody, like if your dad or your mom knew somebody that was already in the position that you want to eventually achieve, they would said, "Hey, my son, my daughter wants to be you when they grow up. Can you help him out?" And they would become a mentor. They would say, "Hey, you should take these steps to get to my position or beyond."
Right.
And I think mentors are great, and I think mentors should be assigned to high schoolers to help them follow a path that they want to follow. Not a path that the parents want them to follow, but a path that they actually choose to follow.
Right. And even with the ones, and I thought about this, in school, the children that get in trouble, there's a way we deal with discipline. But if we had some program like that, they have mandatory this and mandatory that, um, come up with something mandatory that's community oriented. I saw this at Fort Gordon. They had a school there for youth that were troubled, but it was like a campus type thing. But even if it
Hmm.
was something that was a weekend before it got to the point that they had to be campus, where they actually went, just like the reserves or a drill or something.
Hmm.
The whole time they're there, it's mentoring. You're teaching the things that we're talking about now. You're getting into the government, just helping develop their roles. What do you want to do? Just sit around conference and all that. Those type things they're happening, and some organization is doing it, but it's under the thought that this is I got a nonprofit, and they gave me money to do this. So that's the exception, not the rule. There's a lot of things that we need to do different in our community. And I think that could be done under this next one that I'm calling the power statement. Develop
Hmm.
a Black united front. In other words, if we are all over and we're dealing with some of the same things, it shouldn't be something going on in Alabama that isn't somehow available to people that might be in Chicago. How did they handle this there? Right now, by the time that we as people hear about something, we in reactionary mode. But if it was something set up where people were looking and they were a part of a community and that was their role, even though that wasn't their responsibility, they had a role to monitor that versus responsibility of getting it done. My thought is people would actually do that role that much better if they had aspirations of going into office. And when they went into office, knowing the role that they had, that somebody else was going to fill that, I think it would be a greater sense of accountability when individuals did get into office just by simply putting something like that into play. At least that would be the goal anyway. But
Right. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. But I was just going to say, and all that would be under that united front, the Black united front, that community accountability, and the other arena, the politics. When I mentioned the OTR community, it's a large engulfing community. The intent is to educate, motivate, and rise above situations and circumstances. I see that happening, but if we're going to make it a movement, we just identified earlier that we have to build infrastructure, not just movements. Go ahead. You were about to say something.
So I completely agree with that. I had that experience as a child when my parents they sent me to a progressive leadership camp, and it was for kids between the ages of I believe it was 10 and 15. And so we went to summer camp. It was all summer, and then when we got there, the kids basically ran the camp. We were assigned duties and we were assigned jobs, and we were there from May all the way to August. And the kids ran the camp. Literally, it was just adults sitting back and saying, "Hey, nope, you should do this, not that. You may hurt yourself." That's all they did. They just kind of sat back, patched up everybody that got scratched or anything like that, or breakup fights, but they weren't really doing anything to tell kids what to do, if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
So what they did was every single week we would rotate jobs. And by the last month in August, we got to be put in the job that the adults observed us being most successful in. And come to find out, a lot of those kids, I would say probably 95% of those kids, they ended up flourishing because they found out what they're good at. We all had to try something, and if we're not motivated to do it but we're good at it, they would stick us in that job again for 2 weeks in a row, and let us grow a love for it, and it worked. I mean, for kids it worked. And so I
Mhm.
think that's a great way of figuring out who's the servants, who's the mechanics, who's the leaders, who's the observers, who's the hunters, who's the gatherers, and those you figure out these segments of people, and then they sent home an action report similar to what we're doing, saying, "Hey, this is the things that your son Gregory is good at. These are the things that he's not so good at, and he might needs to work on." And
Right. Right.
it
Hmm.
helped me out tremendously. I
Right.
went from being a CD student to an AB student because my parents took me out of classes and put me in classes that I flourished in.
Hmm.
And they found out very quickly, oh, the reason why he wasn't doing good in math because that math was too easy for him. When he actually got a challenge, he flourished in the challenging parts. So I
Right.
went from learning basic algebra, which I already knew in third grade. They teaching me again in tenth and ninth and 10th grade. I'm like, I already know this. And so I was acing tests, but I was bored. I was causing problems in the classroom. And
Right.
so back then, they would lower your grade if you were causing a problem.
Hmm.
Nowadays they don't do that, but um, they put me in AP math, and it was the first time I actually got like a 75% on a test. I was like, dang, that actually was hard. That was actually real hard. I like this. And I was the type of person that I like a challenge. So um I didn't need to be asked to study. I just started picking up books and reading stuff and looking at magazines and stuff like that. And my goal was to stump my math teacher with a question. It
Hmm.
took me 3 years in that high school to stump my math teacher with a question. I stumped him. And once because the way he would get stumped is he would say, you know what? I need to read something about that. That's how you knew he got stumped. But he would never admit that he didn't know.
Right. Let me
So
research. Let me research that. Yeah, I got you.
right. So I think we should have those things put in place or bring them back to help us discover what kids are good at instead of forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. That's how you
Hmm.
get a troubled kid. That's how you get a kid that's always problematic. That's how you get a kid that's bored in class because you're making him do something you think he needs to do. Oh, we need to make him do algebra because you're gonna need algebra when you grow up. I use 2 days worth of algebra as an adult. I'm 40 years old. I don't use algebra at all. Nothing.
Right. Right. I got you. I got you.
And so, I mean, it comes down to um, people wanting to do things to help society along. If you love what you do, you're going to help society along. If you hate what you do, you're just a spot and a number on a paper. That's all you
Right.
doing. You just breathing all the good air for nothing.
Not for nothing, Brother Greg. There's still hope. But I like everything that we've said so far, because if you notice on the screen, we still have the topic of how do we correct it? And we went from the Black Lives movements in a roundabout way to discussing our communities and our youth. But it's
Hmm.
education, because as Brother Gregory said, it's those same individuals that you're working with at that point that's going to go on to run for office, possibly get it. And the better the foundation that they have, the better politician that they can be. I want to share this with you all, then we're going to work toward wrapping up. I was in the process of doing my dissertation, and I was reviewing what this, of all things, this teacher in Alabama, she did her dissertation on teaching uh, African American history. And one of the things she said was there was not enough study on it. And when I got ready to do my dissertation on it, the guy that I had as my I guess he was in my, but this individual, when I put my study together, by the time I got to him, his thought was it shouldn't be about black, which was usually if a person says there's not enough study, that validates the study in. But he wanted it to be about something, what was it, sensitive subjects, wanted me to pull in LGBT and all this other stuff and how people have difficulties teaching that, which was my last concern. But long story short, when it comes down to the study, one of the things I found is that there there was a problem with people teaching Black history. But the reason that it was supposedly taught, if you remember at one point, they did a serious effort at teaching it. They had governmental studies and everything. But the reason behind those studies and the reason they embraced that was supposedly that anyone that had history and learned history, they knew what this country stood for and how it was able to get where it was, and the difficulties and the reality. So, but that difficulty and reality translated into trauma, even for teachers trying to teach that
Hmm.
topic. So today, when we look at this thing where we've gotten to the point where they rather take history out than actually try to incorporate it, is because of the fact that they're not prepared to deal with the history of how we got where we are. Our youth, in many cases, don't know it because it hadn't been taught. The teachers don't want to teach it because it's traumatic for them, and they are learning the history as they are, get to that point where they're preparing to teach. So a lot of things get lost in that. That falls under the same guideline here if we're talking about how we need to come up with something that's of more substance than just something to put in place. There's a real battle, which is the one where we're educating our own neighborhoods, we're doing these things. That's what that Black Front is. But because we're in the United States where there's a government, the forward battle is those individuals that are demanding what it is that we are due because we're here in this country, and we are due that because we are citizens. Our battle is twofold. So how do we correct it? We have the challenge of fighting on two fronts, what I call the rear battle and the forward battle. And then there comes that question of when do we do it again? The when do we do it again? My response to that is as soon as possible. But we have to incorporate the things that we have kind of discussed here. Brother Gregor, we're wrapping up. So that when do we do it again? Anything else you want to add going into your Emmy moment? Talk to me.
Um, when do we do it again? I think, we you have to ask yourself, what are we doing again? Because
Hmm.
when can be today, tomorrow, or next year, but what we're actually going to do is the plan that needs to be formed.
Hmm.
My Amy moment is when uh, we discussed how uh, uh, we probably should incorporate leaders to help guide young people into the direction we want them to go, but at the same time, let them see the path they want to choose. Give
Hmm.
them options.
Okay, I like that, and that's going to be a good challenge because in order to give them some creditable choices versus just the routine things, we talked politics, we talked about the school that were outside of the education system. So that calls for some preparation. But you made the comment about doing it again, but what are we doing again? That's the benefit of this after action report. What we are doing again is we are preparing for a situation of this nature, and we are incorporating the issue with the finance that we need to put in place. We're incorporating the fact that it needs to be something of structure versus symbolism. So that piece there, to even just to know that, remember that, helps us as we enter into the next step. So there's a lot that we have to do. There's a lot that we can do, and life demands it. The future demands it as well. As we move forward, I think the complacency that we have experienced, and when we put people like President Trump in the equation, when we put things like people that want to go and do all this out of emotions, and put people like us who are trying to think it through, it gets to be a point where it's a constant, should be a constant evolving towards something better. So that's our role. Rise to the occasion. There's some things going on, and if we rise to the occasion, we'll be a part of the problem. Should I say we'll be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problems? There's enough problems that if we pick out the one that we want to be involved with, rose to the occasion, this is where I'm going to get myself involved. This is where I'm going to put my hand to the plow. You'd be surprised how much of a difference it could make. I think that systemically, I think as a community, I think as a people, we are working towards something that is more of a community. And that community, as I said, should be a community on the rise, a community of communities. We have all these states, we have the different continents, different countries. There's nothing saying that we can't all be on the rise, educating, motivating, and inspiring individuals to rise above life situations, circumstances. I'd like to thank you all for joining me. Brother Gregory, thank you so very much. You have made this review here an excellent one. And as we move into some more challenging things as to what the Rise is going to be doing, Brother Gregory, I want to leave you with a challenge. That program that you mentioned about the youth running things and how we should have something like that. If you can have any literature on it or find something that's in existence now, here in Georgia to use as a model or something that we can work toward. If you can't, that would be great. I greatly appreciate it. I want to
All right.
invite you all to join us on Wednesday. And when I say us, I mean Lady Antoinette. And I am her co-host on the program. And the program is Rise to Prosperity. I'm trying to make sure I show the right one here. And here we go.
Greetings, peace and blessings. You're invited to Rise to Prosperity, Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. I, Lady Antoinette, and my co-host, Minister Jamie Eatman, would love for you to join us, our panelists, and our conversation room guests Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. as we rise to prosperity.
And I don't think I informed you all what you were listening to, but this is the OTR movement.
This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.
And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth.
Greetings, I am Jamie Eaton. Join me Fridays at 8 p.m. for On the Rise movement.
I don't think there's anything else to be said other than thank you all for joining me. And as you all encounter this later, I hope you are just as blessed by something that was going to say it, and that it causes you to at least rethink something, if not change the way you think. Peace and blessings be unto you all. And thanks again, Brother Gregory.